Welcome everyone to See I Am Me. I am your host, Rashawn Warren, and today we got a fabulous guest, someone that I want to introduce to you. So I worked with him once before back in the day when he was in the military, but today we're going to talk about the second act and how people are moving on to things after they finished their first career. And today I want to introduce James Crenshaw. Let's go.
All right. I'm honored, Rashawn, that you would have me on your show. I'm honored that you would consider me for this chat. I'm looking forward to having a chat with you.
Hey, I appreciate it. So like I said before in the introduction, the second act, what it's all about. And I'll tell a quick story to introduce you all, let you know how we cross paths. So I'm a youngster. I'm going through the captain career course, I believe. And James, then, Major Crenshaw, he was you were our XO S.3-ish. And, it's a part of helping people grow. If you don't know about the military, we have these gates that we have to meet. And within those gates, we have people that are there to help us along the way. Now, not every person you run into, you make a connection with, but some people you do. And the connection made with him was because he was a good person. He looked out for everyone, and I felt that he cared. And that was a relationship that we maintained from that moment on until his retirement. So, James, can you tell us a quick story about who you are, how we met, and what you're doing now before we get started?
Sure, I can. So, if memory serves me, Oklahoma is when we met. Right around the time that you mentioned. I think you were either in the career course or you were teaching. You were an instructor on a platform at the schoolhouse. And I think we connected that way. Of course, I see this extremely tall, athletic brother who stood out literally above everybody. And then when I talked to him, understood, such a well-rounded human being, such a well-rounded man. And so we connected in that way, connected, if I remember correctly, because we had similar backgrounds, came up on the rough side of the mountain. I think we shared that even back then. But again, it was, like you said, it was an instant connection.
Yeah. So, and I want to agree, we had a similar background, and that's important for people to take into account.
Yeah.
Sometimes, we just we look for people like us in order to identify with them sometimes. And it's just the way that people are built, right? People who have similar backgrounds have the tendency to kind of meld together. And like I said, you were a phenomenal person. I believe at that point, you were always on point, but you were always a phenomenal person. So tell us a little bit about what you're doing these days. After you have did your military service and bam, you went off into the civilian realm. So who are you these days?
Okay, yeah. And just to add on to that last statement, I mean, back then you couldn't have convinced me that energy was a thing, right? But now I know, almost a decade later, that energy is a thing, and certain people give off certain energy, and you gave off that certain energy, and clearly I connected with that energy. Yeah, so likewise, you're a phenomenal human. In terms of what I'm doing nowadays, just like most people that spend their entire adult life or a significant part of their adult lives in the military, there's a lot of trepidation, transitioning. What am I going to do after I get out? If I had this, I'm accustomed to this way of life. I'm accustomed to certain type of people, structure and predictability and so on and so forth. And so I met enough people, though, connected with enough other people with great stories and great energy, right, to help mentor me through that process. And then I also had to plan. And really use the processes that were given to us. So what I do now, I'm a Department of Defense contractor. Once upon a time, I was a missile defense officer like yourself. An opportunity presented itself, and I'm no longer doing missile defense stuff, but I am still doing Department of Defense stuff, working over at U.S. Cybercom, the newest combatant command in the Army. And God demonstrated to me that he takes whatever sacrifices you've gone through in your life, if you continue to work, and he manifests those as opportunities. And man, he manifested that as an opportunity. So I'm enjoying myself. I'm living as I told you, my blessed life.
Oh yeah, and that's super awesome, man. I'll tell you something crazy when you talk about energy and the continuum of life. So I actually right now have the job that you had before, right? I actually am sitting in the same place, in the same job, in the same country that you had before you transitioned out of the military. I mean, you talk about energy, right? But I tell you, people meet for a reason, and I believe our paths cross, and I am excited to share your story. So what we're going to do real quick, we're going to go to a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we're going to jump right into the interview firsthand. Let's go.
Sounds good.
Focus up. Hey man, zoom in. Welcome. My name is Chris Rubio of the Rubio Method. Soak it in. Wear it as a nice sweatshirt, a nice yellow sweatshirt. See if it fits. And it may be something you say, okay, I'm listening to, but I don't really like it. Not for me. What the hell are you thinking? You have no idea what you're talking about. You have issues because of your bad taste.
We are back in the game. I hope you enjoyed those commercials, huh?
Man, most inspirational set of advertisements I've ever seen.
Oh yeah, good to go. The network is doing its thing. Yeah. So let's just jump into it, right? So we talked about how you were once a military officer, lieutenant colonel in the United States Army, the deputy air and missile defense commander in Japan, and then you transitioned into cyber. So share like a personal journey, or how you transition in your midlife after your primary career was over.
Okay, I can do that. Like I said earlier, of course, there's going to be a lot of trepidation about that transition. If you've been doing a thing for the majority of your adult life, right? For me, what was helpful is my wife, she has always been my biggest cheerleader, and she has always seen in me more than I see in myself. She has always helped me to understand my value. And so once I started listening more during this transition about what my value was, and started matching what I wanted to do or what I thought I wanted to do with what I've done, you have to give yourself credit for your accomplishments, regardless of what field you're in, regardless of what you're doing with your life. As you transition, you have to give yourself credit for what you've done. And you also have to be humble enough to start over if that's what it takes. And so I think listening to advice from her and others, and being humble enough to say, I'm ready to start over if I have to, with the caveat that I'm going to only go so low in terms of my pay floor, so working that all together, and a lot of prayer, man, helped me transition, helped me move from something I was good at and familiar with into something I was entirely unfamiliar with. Although what I'm doing now within that cyber realm, I'm familiar with. But again, I was unsure about the new environment I was going into. But what I was confident about was my value and what I brought to the table, so to speak. I know that's a cliche statement, what you bring to the table, but you got to recognize what skills you have, and and lean on those, and then you can only worry about it or you can pray about it, but you can't do both. That's it.
Yeah, and that's interesting, right? Because you've been an air missile defense officer for a long time. You've been a soldier for a long time, and then bam, it's time to make a move. It's time to do something different. And so what was in your way when you started to make that decision? Because you talk about your wife believing in you. You talk about, knowing your worth. And you talked about like, hey, I'm only going so low with this pay. challenge was in your way as you made that move and started transitioning?
Yeah. So some of the barriers I think that were in my way, the number one barrier in my way was me, right? Just like I said earlier, understanding my worth and my skill set, and understanding that as a lifelong learner, that's an asset, right? You're a lifelong learner, so you know what I'm talking about. You never stop learning, you never stop reading, you never stop trying to grow, you never stop reaching. And so the biggest barrier in the way was me getting out of my own way, right? And so once I got past my first interview, I think that's what helped me. I think once I got past my first career fair, I think that helped me. And it wasn't just one career fair or one interview, it was multiple. Again, it was part of the plan. Once I got out of my way and made a plan, and once I laid out what my skills were, and once I understood how to translate those military skills into civilian skills, and sort of layer that over the plan, I think it helped me get out of my own way. That was my biggest barrier.
Yeah, and that's straight up kind of what we tied into, right? You got to see yourself, be yourself, right? I heard this quote. It says from Les Brown. It says, if you go through life being casual, you will wind up a casualty.
Yeah,
I thought that was so powerful. But listening to your story and how you're telling me that you were the one that was standing in your way, and maybe you were going into an unfamiliar environment, right? Because like in the military, you're a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army. Only 8% of people get to achieve that rank. So you went there, and then you're like, okay, the structure and everything may be different when I go into another location. You identified the challenges, but I think that's powerful that you say, like, I was the obstacle. So since you knew when you found out that you were the obstacle, like what did you kind of do? I know your wife helped you navigate it, but once you realized it was you, what were you thinking?
Once the light came on, right? Relating to that Les Brown quote that you just stated, I think the converse of that is the converse of being a casualty and casual is being deliberate, right? You are being deliberate in the things that you are doing, like with this show, you're being deliberate. I had to be deliberate, man. I had to say, I'm going to do these things to set the conditions for my success. Career fairs and interviews and humility. It could not be a casual transition into, because if you, again, if you are casual about your transition, you could become a casualty. I didn't want to be a casualty, bro. And so I was very deliberate in my planning, very deliberate. I had two jobs, the job I'm currently in, and then I had a job of transitioning. That became an 8-hour or more a day, 5 to 7 days a week job. How bad do you want it, right? How bad do you want to ensure that it's a seamless transition for you and your family into post-military or into that second career, into that second phase of life? And so I made that a job. I set aside all those things that that I was leaving, made space for myself to have that as a full-time effort. Deliberate. That's the best word. I was deliberate in what I did.
No, being deliberate, man. I'm gonna have to write that down, because you said you made your transition a job.
Sir.
I'm not playing around with this. I gotta go where I need to go. This is what I want, and this is how I'm getting there, until you got to where you wanted to be. So you pretty much you travel down that continuum with the end in mind. You were like, this is where I want to be. This is what I want. And man, you know what? I think that the viewers will take that away, because the casual, not being deliberate can hurt you in a long run. So since we're talking about like being deliberate, like what, once you decided, hey, I'm leaving the military, I'm gonna hang this up. Well, like what actual factors really influenced you making that decision?
Before I tell you those factors, let me tell you that being deliberate means being willing to go back to school, being willing to go into training, being willing to expand your skill set. Because here's the challenge that some could have faced. You get to the end of your career, you're comfortable. You're like, I have achieved X, Y, and Z. I don't have to work hard. Untrue, right? And so you have to be prepared to humble yourself a little and do those things necessary. Now, man, the factors that led to me deciding to transition were, I told myself, if I do, there was a set of things I wanted to do. If I did those things and it didn't pan out, God was telling me something, right? One, I would have no regrets because I at least tried them. Two, if they didn't happen for me, they were not for me. If they didn't happen when I thought they should happen, they were not part of God's plan. I pursued command. I pursued ROTC, PMS. I pursued senior service college. I knew, though, going into those, what my odds of getting those were. But again, I didn't want to have any regrets. And so they didn't pan out like I thought they would or could. And once I got over the initial sting of being told no, pick myself up and say, you know what? They weren't for me because they're not part of God's plan. And in retrospect, when I look back, had I forced it and tried to make those things work, I would not be where I am now. My family wouldn't be. Man, I can't tell you how blessed we are. My wife's mom and dad live 7 minutes down the road, not planned. Her 3 brothers all live within an hour of us with their families, not really planned. All we wanted to do was sort of get a job that was middle between DC and my old job, and whatever opportunity came up and all that other stuff manifested. Youngest baby lives 45 minutes away. Oldest baby lives about an hour and a half away. So I feel like had I forced those things, it would have taken me off God's path. God lays it out for us, right? And we can go down that path or we can deviate, which a lot of us do. And I have deviate from, and then you get back on the path. And so really it was, to answer your question, long way to the answer, but I wanted to make sure I tried some stuff so I didn't have any regrets, and then sort of understand what God was telling me to do. That's it.
Yeah, you traveled your path.
Yes.
You let it flow, right?
Yep.
So once you start transitioning, I know in the military we learn a lot of skills, like from the time we're like baby LT, baby soldier, until we're senior leader, developing, molding other people. What skills from the military catapulted you into being successful into your current job?
Really, we joke about this, my wife and I, but they are paying me for the way I think, and they are paying me for the way I write, right? And so what I'm doing now, I've done before on a smaller scale multiple times. And so I'm doing it now. It's sort of scaled up. I'm a joint planner, essentially. But what you're doing and what I did sort of paved the way. Missile defense is inherently joint, and you wind up learning a lot of joint stuff, right? And so that, coupled with the fact that I'm a confident writer, I believe I could put together coherent thoughts and articulate myself well and put that in writing really well. Those are the skills that help me being a confident writer, being a someone who listens, and someone who is willing to take in inputs from other folks and not just have an echo chamber in your head,
Yeah.
and to be a lifelong learner. Those things are what helped me.
Yeah, I think that's all those skills you mentioned, but that one that's kind of powerful that most people forget is you said you were willing to listen. You're a
Sir,
good listener.
sorry, we got two
People,
ears. We got 2 ears and 1 mouth.
yeah, people get lost on that. Hey, we're gonna take another quick commercial break, team, and then we're gonna come back and we're gonna continue on with James Crenshaw.
Hi, Joel Maurer, founder of Dink Ninjas. Dink Ninjas was dreamed up and started right here in Austin, Texas, a dynamic pickleball community. We arm pickleballers with the paddles, apparel, and accessories to dink like a ninja. Dink Ninjas is dedicated to supporting mental health awareness and cancer research. Shop our full lineup at dinkninjas.com.
All right, we're back, James. So over the commercial break, I was thinking about the things that you've done in your career. Like, I don't even have to have the conversation with you to know the things that you've done because I've been there. I've been going down the same timeline that you kind of been because you're senior to me. And for a lot of people don't get the opportunity to be a commander at any level. So when you're a young captain and you're out there commanding troops, how did that feel for you?
Oh, it was an amazing feeling, man. So when I was a platoon leader, I didn't think that my leadership experience could be any better than my platoon leader time. I didn't think anything could exceed that in terms of helping to grow soldiers and young men at the time, just pretty much since I was short range air defense back then. And we were deployed. I didn't think anything could exceed that. And then fast forward to becoming a battery commander, a company level commander of a Patriot unit. It was amazing. It far exceeded my expectations. I won't say it far exceeded my time as a platoon leader. It's apples and oranges, but it was an amazing experience that rivals my leadership time as a platoon leader. It was an opportunity to help people grow again, to help shape lives. Here's the other thing. They help grow me and they help shape my life. So much so, I still maintain contact with a bunch of my folks from when I was a battery commander and when I was a platoon leader. I'm on a group text with a bunch of jokers that we talk trash about sports, primarily football. But it was an amazing experience because I was humble enough to know I didn't know everything, but I was hungry enough to know that, I'm going to learn everything from anybody, from the most junior of my folks, of our folks, to the most senior. And I saw that opportunity for what it was. It was a chance to learn and grow, not just me, but as a collective. And so it was an amazing experience. I hoped to do it again at the battalion level, but it didn't work out. And now, in retrospect, I know it wasn't supposed to work out. Again, going back to what we talked about earlier.
And I asked that question about command because when you're in charge of a bunch of people, it's all on you, man. How are you thinking up here? How you're able to make decisions, and really, are you a people person within a people organization? I think that aspect of the human dimension sometimes get lost. But with that being said, as you transitioned into your new job from being a leader of men at the highest of levels into something a little bit different, how did you approach that? Were there any setbacks or obstacles that you had to overcome?
I wouldn't say so. Funny thing though, as I mentioned, I loved being in charge and I loved being the leader or, part of an organization and making decisions. But when I transitioned, I specifically didn't want that. I wanted to be responsible for one person, me. Because if you want to be an effective leader, you got to put your whole self into it. If you want to be able to help grow folks, you got to give it every bit of your energy, every ounce of your energy. And that is very taxing. So having done that for a significant part of my adult life, I was enlisted up to the level of a staff sergeant, and I was a platoon sergeant as a staff sergeant. So from the time I pinned corporal stripes and to the time I retired, I was leading in some shape or form. And so transition, not really any obstacles other than finding a gig that did not require me to lead anybody, at least not right now. And being able to diplomatically tell people who see leadership skills in you, I don't want that right now, because it's already been broached. And I had to, again, diplomatically tell people that I am happy just being a member of the team right now.
Oh yeah, that's true. I laugh because I hear that from most guys and gals, right? They say, hey, when I'm done with this thing, I just want to focus on me. And I understand the taxing part, because even if you're not the commander, if you're like a deputy commander or something, you still got all those folks out there that's coming to you for advice and you're trying to make it work.
Right.
I want to kind of dive in on your whole experience, your whole life experience as it pertains to all the knowledge that you have gained to this point in your career, in your life. What advice could you give the guys that are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, that are contemplating a career transition? Considering your own experience, what advice do you have for people?
My advice would be get out of your own way. And that's different for everybody, right? If you want to transition and you want to do something very low key, or you just want to enjoy retirement and sit on your sofa, your love seat, or do projects around the house, that's fine. But make sure that you get out of your own way so that you can do that. Make sure you don't take on a whole bunch of other stuff that's going to interfere with that plan. But if you want to keep climbing professionally, get out of your own way. Be, like I said, humble enough to know that your skills may have limits and you may have to get some additional education or additional training or additional mentoring. It's all about just humility, I think, right? So that's my biggest tip for folks transition. You just pack your bag and make sure it is loaded down with humility, right? It's got to have a plan in there. It's got to have some deliberateness, but it's got to have a bunch more of humility in there so that when you come up against obstacles, your feelings don't get hurt, right? If things don't go your way or the way you plan. So that if you wind up waiting longer for a thing, as you climb, that it doesn't sting as much because you're humbled. I think humility makes you realistic about situations, right? Versus being arrogant, right? If you're arrogant and things don't go your way, I think it's just very destructive.
Okay. Yeah, and that's get out of your own way. Sometimes we believe, at least in my opinion, sometimes I think people believe like this is owed to me. I'm supposed to have this. And they continue to like follow her down that path. But like you said earlier, maybe what's waiting for you is somewhere else. Because I don't believe success is innate to a position. I don't believe that if just because you don't do one thing that you're not a winner, right? There's a plethora of things out there that help us along the way. And I'm going to take with that, get out of my own way and out to everyone that's out there, get out of your own way, figure out what's not working for you, and then go get it somewhere else. So I know you from being around you all the time is that like you're a man of God. You know, you to me you have high values. So how did your personal values and priorities influence the choices you made during your career transition?
Well, first of all, I appreciate you recognizing that. But understand I'm imperfect, right? I'm imperfect in my walk with Christ. And so, but it gives me pause and it helps me be honest with myself about my shortcomings. And because I know I have shortcomings, I know I want people to meet me where I am. And so I have to do the same for others. I have to meet them where they are. I can't have like these unreasonable expectations about people. I can't have these unreasonable expectations about situations. And I certainly can't be entitled. Man, that's poison. Entitlement is one of the most poisonous things in our world, in our society, in our culture, in our country. Being entitled, like something, like you said, something old, not as old to me. You know, I earned some things, but beyond that, nothing's owed to me. You know, if an opportunity arises, it's not owed to me. If a job materializes, it's not owed to me. That's entitlement, and it's dangerous, and it's toxic, and so I try to, again, man, I'm gonna say it, humility. I try to be humble going into any situation when I meet people and when these opportunities come up. Sure, I try to present myself and sell myself during a interview or when I did interview, but I had to make sure it was a ton of humility along with it. So yeah.
Yeah, the carrying that humility, it's kind of rough for some, and I like what you said as far as nothing is owed to me, but you earned some things. You put in the work. When you put in work for something, and you put in the work, there's an expectation that comes along with that. And for you all out there, that's not saying that somebody owes you something. But when you know that you grinded it out and you did everything that you were supposed to do, sometimes you expect things to happen. And when they don't happen, you get in your feelings a little bit. That's fair. You get in your feelings. You're like, man, I worked hard. I did well all this time and it didn't pan out. But like you said, you just said, and like you said earlier, sometimes you have to say, you know what? It wasn't for me. It wasn't part of my plan. And now I got to go do a little bit more in order to get to where I want to be. So with that being said, all of the things that you kind of been talking about are kind of tie into the knowledge that you have over your career, the knowledge that you gained as you rose up from an enlisted soldier to the commissioned officer range into your civilian capacity. Were there any mentors or role models who inspired you along the way that gave you some of this great feedback, some good advice that helped you get to where you at?
Yeah, man, more than I can remember. Sergeant Kerry Campbell was my first real mentor. Sergeant First Class Kerry Campbell. He was from my hometown of Detroit, and the dude epitomized empathy and leadership and compassion and go get it, right? Like I said, our soldiers inspired me, right? And they give me feedback along the way, even after we had parted ways. But in terms of mentors, in addition to Sergeant Kerry Campbell, Hattie LaFay Richardson, Colonel retired, Rich Harrison, now Major General, considered him a mentor, and just many others along the way. So many folks, Joe Booker. There are too many to name. There are literally too many folks that poured into me and they gave me advice along the way. if I had a list, we need a whole other segment of your show for me to run it down. I believe I was poured into more than I poured out into others. And so, but comes to mind are Kerry Campbell, Rich Harrison, Joe Booker, Pat Costello. When I became an XO, battalion XO, I was like, man, how do I do this job? I reflected back on his time, and I was like, copy that guy until I figured it out.
Yeah.
So yeah, tons of mentors in uniform and out of uniform, and that is important too as you transition. Find yourself some veteran mentors. Anybody that is, there's a bunch of people who did it before you. So whether you're in or whether you transition out, recognize those people who seem to have done it better than you, and even those people who stumbled. You can gain knowledge from those folks too. So ton of mentors.
Yeah. You learned. You just named a bunch of people. So what I gleaned from that is that your career wasn't the James Crenshaw show, right? So you had a lot of co-cast members helping you along the way, that gave you some its and bits and some pieces of things to help you become who you ultimately became and who you will become in the future. Some of those names that you named, I haven't had the pleasure to work with them, but I know them and I've seen them. And it to me, it's like those people who had the tendency to pour into people continuously pour into people. So I'm gonna hit you with another quote. I got all these quotes like locked in my mind. It says, I heard this quote, don't let your mess be a negative message. You know what I mean? So
like
you gotta turn your mess into a message. And all of those people that's been helping you along the way, man, has really benefited other people. Because like you said, but there's another interesting thing you said. You said, I've been poured into more than I poured into other people. What did you mean by that?
Like, I'm convinced that I've gained more from others than others have gained from me, is what I'm saying. I'm also saying that in those acts of somebody pouring into me and me pouring into someone, invariably they're going to be pouring into somebody. And so we all are connected. And I have concluded that this world is smaller than we think. I have run into folks that I've poured into and who have poured into me later on in life. Again, I stay in contact with folks, and we are a community of folks who have shared knowledge with each other along the way. It's a continuous thing. So somebody pours into me, I'm responsible to pour into others. They are then responsible to pour into others, and so on and so forth. So what I meant is I have gained, in my view, more from others than I think others have gained from me. I might be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, we learn with the intent to teach.
Sure.
So as we continue to be poured into, we just turn around and get at to someone else.
You don't turn off your faucet.
Yeah. Jim Rohn talked about your mental reservoir. Talks about everyone that you're in contact with each day, whether they're positive or negative, they're pouring into your mental reservoir just by the simple fact that you're listening to them. And we would like to think that we don't gain anything from people who are talking negative stuff to us, but unfortunately, our brain is cataloging that stuff. It's cataloging that stuff. And sometimes unintentionally, we take those things that we didn't really agree with or we really didn't want to listen to, and we project it on other folks. And
Agreed.
Man, this thing is hot right now. But unfortunately, we need to go to a quick commercial break, team, and we'll come back and we'll get right back into it with James Crenshaw.
Looking forward to it.
Hey, it's AC of AC Sports Live, an interactive sports talk show where your comments are part of the show. Every show we focus on the sports stories of today with commentary on sports takes, My Two Cents, which is a reaction to my social media feed. Sports Flicks, where we take a look at sports movies and give a quick review. We have a segment called Mental Reps, where we have words of inspiration to help battle the dark side of men's mental health. And then there's the Tender Love Report. Who's being soft or petty in the world of sports? All takes are welcome under one condition. Say it with your chest. I'll see you there.
All right, we're back. All right, so we've been covering a bunch of topics. We've been going pretty hard, and I agree all the feedback that you've been giving and how you've been keeping it real with the audience. But I think the insight that you're providing is definitely going to help people as they move forward. So out of all the things that we just spoke about, the Army sometimes tells us, hey, you need to extend your influence beyond a chain of command, meaning that where you are, you just can't be successful on the inside in this little compartment. You got to be successful on the outside in order to bring other things into the organization to help improve people. So when I talk about that particular concept, how did you approach building a professional network in your new industry? And how has that networking contributed to your success?
Yeah. So a little background beyond, the bio stuff that I gave you. I'm an only child, and I think that contributed to me being an introvert. But along the way, being placed in positions of leadership, I was able to sort of flip a switch when necessary. And then learning about emotional intelligence too along the way. That's important. Again, part of that lifelong learning. Didn't know what emotional intelligence was or what that concept meant, right? So to answer your question, once I understood those things about myself and emotional intelligence, I recognized that I had to get out my comfort zone. And that meant going out and meeting people. That meant going out and building relationships. You know the deal, as the Iron Major as we were once upon a time, you told the biggest commodity for majors to focus on is building relationships, right? Mm-hmm. And so I just built on that, right? When I pinned the silver leaf on, like you have, I continued to build relationships beyond my organization, beyond my skill set, beyond my comfort zone. And so that carried over into what I'm doing now. Bunch of cubicles where I work, right? And if you are not careful, you can be like a prairie dog. You can just pop out and back down, pop out and back down. But you got to get outside of those cubicles and go, press the flesh, as they call it, shake hands, look at people in the eyes, It's hard to it's harder to miscommunicate when you're looking people in the face, right? Very easy to miscommunicate over an email or over a text or over instant message or what have you. So that is how I was able to pursue exactly what the Army taught us about extending your influence beyond the organization. Take your body outside of your organization. Take your voice outside of your comfort zone, outside of your normal sphere of influence. Get out and push your sphere out by meeting other folks that you wouldn't normally meet. You'd be surprised of the benefits.
Yeah, I think that's phenomenal thought. And you said you could be a prairie dog, or you could like, I'm up, you see me, I'm down, right? I got two things to share pertaining to what you just talked about. I had a leader once tell me that I shouldn't fall victim to plasma paralysis, right? And at first I was like, what do you mean plasma paralysis? You mean like if you looking at the plasma on that computer screen all day, you're not going to get the message to people who need to get it. You got to go see them in their face. And then that leads to the thought of see yourself, be yourself, like we talked about earlier. You said, hey, you know what? I was an introvert at a time. I was the only kid, but so you had to get out of your comfort zone and go see people where they stood in order to get the things that you wanted, because it is hard to tell people no in their face. I know this, right? But you had to overcome that in order to get out there and make sure that you were making things happen, not only in your sphere, but bringing other people into what you're currently doing. Because I want to say, and you give me your thoughts on this, I want to say you can have all the skills in the world. You could be the best person at your occupation, but you're going to need people outside of that occupation in order to truly maximize and be effective as you can be from other areas. What do you think about that?
I completely agree 100%. I guarantee you that some captain of a aircraft carrier can't sail that joker by himself, right? Yeah. I guarantee you he or she are the best of the best, that the Navy has made the right decision to pick them for that job. But I guarantee you they need a whole bunch of other folks to help them get that joker out of the docks, right? And across the ocean. So I agree with you 100%. You can't do it by yourself. And you have to, we are communal by nature, right? We have to connect with others, I think that's when you get the most done, by connecting with others. And again, that's part of that earlier answer. It helps with extending your sphere, just connecting with people.
Hey, James, I appreciate the conversation today. So,
man, I do too.
Unfortunately, we're coming to an end. We're going to have to shut this thing down. But before we leave, I want to open up the door to you, and you give some final remarks to the people out there, to those men in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, or to whoever else is watching. In parting ways, what would you leave to those folks? What would you leave for them?
Real quick, again, I'm honored that you would consider me to take part in this endeavor. Phenomenal. But my parting words would be stuff I've already said. Be humble. Entitlement is toxic and poisonous, right? Get out of your own way, right? And be deliberate. And whatever you're doing, be deliberate. You will become a victim of circumstances if you fail to plan. So those are my parting words.
Is there, if there's somebody out there that want to get a hold of you and kind of talk to you about how you're transitioning with and anything that they need to help them, is there a certain way that they can get a hold of you? Or you got LinkedIn or Facebook or something that you want to share? Yeah,
LinkedIn. If they look up James L. Crenshaw on LinkedIn, you won't see this. It'll be a less current, smooth face photo. But since if you want to talk professionally, we can certainly start via LinkedIn.
Hey, James, I want to thank you for giving me your time today. I
thank
really
you, sir.
appreciate you. And we'll definitely keep in contact, and hey, just keep being the great person that you are, extending your influence as far as you can go. And then I'll definitely see you down the road.
I'll talk to you soon, sir.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for joining I Am Me. I'm your host, Rashawn Warren, and we'll catch you on the backside.
Listen.